Welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. So happy that you decided to stay with us. If you just happened to be joining us, we are here today with Dan Oakes, and he is a therapist here in the Valley in Mesa, Arizona. Thank you so much for staying with us, Dan.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So good to have you. And at the beginning of the show, you told us you've been practicing therapy and for a long time here.
Yeah, been in Mesa a while.
Wow, very good. And so we just got done discussing protecting your family from pornography, your children, yourself, your spouse. And so our next topic kind of leads into this. We're speaking about talking to your children about sexuality. So this opens another door. We're going to do everything we can as parents. Everyone is going to do what they can. But we still live in a society that is driven and ran by sex. And that is something that if you turn your TV on, if you do have filters on your computer, even on family stations now, what they call family stations, I'm appalled at some of the commercials.
That's right.
That you even see. I think to myself, when I was a child, this was on, you know, certain networks we weren't allowed to watch, but now it's everywhere.
That's right.
So it's important to talk with our kids about it because we can only shelter them so much. If they're out around people, they're going to hear about it, they're going to see it, it's in the music. When should parents begin to talk to their kids about sexuality?
Well, that's a great question, and there's lots of different opinions about it. I think in terms of talking about sexuality, I think at a very young age we start to see the idea of their identity and who they are as an individual, as a male or a female. While we're not actually talking about sexuality, we don't want to shy away from those themes. And I think somehow in our progressive culture, that has mistakenly been seen as a bad thing, to emphasize a gender role. And but as kids grow up, it's really important as early as age 8 that and this has kind of been my hallmark with my own children, not to mention the clinical advice I give others, that by the age 8, you've had a very distinct mechanical conversation. By mechanical, I mean they know the facts. They completely understand where babies come from. They understand what sexual intercourse is. They understand what intimacy is. And we know that at 8, they're not going to comprehend all of that, but we want them to know the mechanics. And we don't want any mystery about it. And while they may not get all of the facts, what we're doing really is we're setting a standard for our children that we are the source for good, healthy, appropriate information about sexuality.
I think you hit on a very important point there that was kind of in my mind while you were speaking, is that they're going to hear it somewhere.
Absolutely.
So as a family, and for a lot of parents watching that maybe grew up in a different generation, to them, to me even, to think at 8 years old, I didn't know what that was, but it's so different today. You want to teach them from your family and from your values the appropriate information so they don't go elsewhere and hear it from kids or from TV or from music. You want to train them and teach them.
You know, I'll tell you a little story about that. My youngest, because as parents you want to decide. I say 8, I'm saying 8-ish. You have to decide what your child's ready for. And we had kind of decided that our youngest probably wasn't quite ready for that conversation at 8. And something happened in the course of conversation where the word sex came up, and she volunteered that she knew exactly what that was. And when I asked her what she said, surprised me because it was so incorrect, but it was normal for an 8-year-old's interpretation. And so the interesting fact was that she had formed a deep opinion about what it was. And so I said to my wife, I said, wow, I really think we do. We had this idea that wasn't even anywhere in her mind. And that's not true. It is in their mind because you say it's everywhere. And I want to say that I think it's always been important for us to teach our kids about sexuality. We want to point them in the right direction. But definitely now, as this sexuality has infiltrated every area of our culture.
So if a parent is sitting at home and they have something on TV, like I said, commercials are so graphic in nature sometimes on stations, and a kid says, "What's that, Mom?" or "What is that used for?" How does a parent approach that in a mature manner that's going to help the child and not make it uncomfortable for them?
Well, I think here's the dilemma: is if you're a parent that has avoided talking to your kids about sexuality, you are not going to know what to say because you know that they won't have context for it. However, if you have these early conversations, then when those questions come up, you can answer them directly. And I suggest you answer maturely and with basic information, and you want to alter the information for them to understand. We want them to understand how the world views sexuality, how we view sexuality, how those combine and don't combine. And so when we have these conversations, it empowers a parent to be honest and open. And we want to encourage honesty and openness around this issue. You know, it's interesting because after you do this 8-year-old kind of making sure they totally understand, I want to add that's important, I think, that husbands and wives do this together. Don't sequester this to like, oh, I don't want to do it, you do it. Do it together so that your children start to see that the roles complement each other, husband and wife, male, female, and that sexuality isn't something that we need to hide for either one of our parents. And then as our kids get older and they turn 11-ish, and we're going to do a puberty prep conversation, maybe even before 11, where we're informing them about what's going to happen to their bodies, and because it's not just a conversation about the sex act, it's a conversation about how they integrate sexuality into who they are as an individual. And so that's a critical part of their social emotional development as well as sexual development.
And you mentioned as a team, as parents. So even the way that parents live, the way that they communicate with each other, the way that they interact, that's going to affect the way that their children end up interacting with people of the opposite sex as they grow up.
Absolutely, and I have to tell you, more important than having conversations about sex is that we model healthy intimacy for our kids, that they see it, that they understand it. I have a favorite story I tell about this. My daughter, when she was 17 or so, she had this boyfriend, and he was a nice guy, and she was at work, and he was at home on the couch. I'm laying on the other couch watching TV. My wife is there right in the kitchen doing something, and my wife says, I need a cup of flour. I don't have any flour. And I said, I need a cup of Shannon, and my wife's name is Shannon, and she trots around the island and runs over to me and jumps on top of me, and we hug and kiss for a second. Nothing inappropriate. But while that's happening, I'm looking at the boyfriend on the couch, and he's shrinking down into the couch. And but I'm thinking, it's okay with me because, young man, I want you to know what real love looks like.
Wow.
And so it's critical that we demonstrate love and affection in our home so that the kids have a context to put the information we give them with. If we give information and we are cold and distant with our spouse and we don't demonstrate love and affection, they're not going to understand how that plays out and what it looks like.
So they see that it's okay for mom and dad, husband and wife, to be affectionate, to love each other, and there shouldn't be anything uncomfortable about that.
Yeah, it is more than okay. It is necessary and critical.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. I think that's something that a lot of people can learn from, because I know that. And so how should a parent address that if they are a single family home? Because sadly, that's something that is so common now.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a lot of grandparents raising children. There's a lot of single dads and single moms. And if you don't have a spouse, that's okay. You have those conversations directly and openly. And don't be afraid if you not sure what to say. There's some great resources. On my website, I have a thing right on the front page that talks about tips to talk to your kids about sex, and there's a couple of links to some books there as well as some information we've talked about today. So do a little research, read a book, but be more confident that you love your child and that you want to give them good information.
Very good. And so just to kind of touch on the pornography issue with children, we talked about how to protect them from it, but if they are exposed to it, if
Right.
they're at a friend's house, if they're at your house
Exactly.
and they see it.
So we've been talking about sex in general, but if your child does have this experience with pornography, it's really important that we affirm them in their experience, because this is going to be exhilarating for them. Absolutely. See, pornography is not a problem because it's disgusting. Pornography is a problem because it's too much of a good thing. There's too much novelty. And your child is going to feel some exhilaration. Their body's going to respond the way it is supposed to. What they're also going to feel, though, is they're feeling this kind of exhilaration outside of the context of relationship. It doesn't happen. It's not happening in the context of connectedness. And so the body responds to this sometimes with a confused feeling, like the body is expecting the real component and it's not there. And so the body has a kind of confused or unsettled response. And so when those two things happen, it's important for us to point this out to our children, ask them questions, and say, yeah, it was it was exhilarating, or it was pleasurable, it was, you liked part of it, right? And how did it make you feel afterwards? And they might say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. And we want to teach them about this principle, that's the confusion is about not having somebody present with you, and that sexuality is supposed to be done in the context of a loving relationship. And that digital sexuality produces lots of adrenaline, but very little connectedness. And so they will notice that, and they may not be able to say that's what they notice, and we want to elicit that with some questions and affirming that it was, we don't want to shame them. We want to say, oh, that's horrible and that's bad and you're wrong for that. And then we start associating shame with sexual feelings. And so we want to then protect them more, make sure we do what we have to do to preserve that and help them not stumble onto that.
If you have a child that you find out is, in an essence, addicted to pornography, how do you address that?
Well, you want to address it aggressively. You want to be very open with your child about it. You want to initially take some very strong behaviors or reactions around limiting pornography. Make sure you are aware of the sources that they're getting it. A lot of parents were unaware of how their child was finding pornography. And then if you need help, ask for help. Go see a therapist or somebody trained in sexual compulsive behavior if you feel that it's gotten to that level. And so don't be afraid. There's a lot of great resources online for that, about how to help parents. A lot of therapists in town that work with sexual compulsive behavior, but don't be afraid to do that.
It sounds like the general theme through speaking through all this is the most important thing is communication. And I know that as a therapist in your line of work, communication is important to speak with people. So how important is it to stress to parents to start from a young age? How do parents start? Do they talk with their kids every night at dinner? How do they start that open line of communication so they don't shame, guilt, or fear with their parents, but that they can come to them and talk to them?
Yeah, I think what you want to do is, long before you talk about sex, you want to develop a relationship where you know your child will come to you. So for example, if your child comes to you and says, hey, I need help with this, and you're pushing them off all the time, they will eventually quit coming to you. So you really want to develop a relationship of trust first, and this is critical. If you have a relationship of mistrust, where you produce severity and intensity and fear in the home primarily, or with your child, they're not going to want to speak to you, nor are they going to be very open about receiving the information you have. And so the first critical step is testing them out, looking for opportunities. When they come to you for help, don't act bothered, be thrilled. Recognize, oh, this is proof to me that they want to come to me, that they trust what I will say to them and trust that I will do something with them and for them. And so that's a critical point.
Very good. Well, Dan, thank you so much. This time always goes so quickly. You have so much great information to share. Thank you for being here and sharing this with our viewing audience.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much at home for watching. I know that this has been a very interesting show, different than what we normally speak about, but we are here to educate you and to help you have a better family and a healthier family. And I think today what we can take away that we usually do is to always have open communication with your family. Talk to your kids, talk to your spouse, and create those healthy, strong bonds so you can go through anything in life and be joyful and happy and have a wonderful, prosperous life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.